name is Fergal O'Brien, and I'm a senior lecturer in finance at the Kimmick Business School at the University of Limerick. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our business programs. So the talk will be entitled Business at UL, and I'm going to highlight, I suppose, what's good about UL, what's good about the business school, and what's good about the 3 degrees that we have on offer to you, which are the Bachelor of Business Studies, or the BBS as we call it, the BA in International Business, the BAIB, and Law and Accounting. There are a number of things that UL does particularly well. We're famous for our work placement program, which we call Co-op. Now, if you come and do a business degree at the University of Limerick, you will have the opportunity to go on 9 months work experience in 3rd year. We organise that work experience for you, and you can choose to do it locally, nationally or internationally, and we do our best to match our jobs with your preferences. What that means is at the end of 4 years with us, because our business degrees are 4 years long, because we incorporated work experience element into it, at the end of 4 years you have your academic qualification and you have 9 months work experience. That makes you very, very employable, and I would encourage you to look at our employment statistics over the last number of years, and you would see that they're amongst the highest, if not the highest, of all universities in Ireland. So that's a real plus in terms of all UL degrees, and obviously the business studies degrees as well, in terms of the potential for you to go on work experience. Another thing that the University of Limerick does very well is the international nature of the student cohort. We are very welcoming to incoming students, and if you come to UL, you'll be surrounded by an international cohort of students. They'll be on study abroad programs, Erasmus programs, etc. And some will actually come to UL for their full degrees. So that gives you, I suppose, a multicultural experience where you meet people from different countries, different ways of thinking, different ways of doing things. You learn about different cultures, you learn about the nuances of language, etc. just by your everyday interactions with international students. We also give you a lot of opportunities in terms of you going abroad. So you can go abroad as part of exchanges or as part of Erasmus programs. And in fact, on one of our business degrees, BA in International Business, there is a compulsory year abroad as part of that program. So very much an international experience if you come to the University of Limerick, and that's particularly the case in business school. I'm not sure in terms of how many of you have visited the University of Limerick, but one of our other strengths is our campus. It's probably, in my opinion, the most stunning campus in Ireland. It's 2 or 3 miles inside the city. It's essentially a rural location, and it's built for university. It's built for your student experience, and the facilities are second to none. Acres and acres of green space, a river running through it. So what the campus facilitates is it facilitates a unique student experience that allows you to be both physically fit and mentally fit. Physically fit because of the acres and acres of sports pitches, the best facilities, 50-meter pool, etc. And mentally fit because of just the general environment, quite a rural setting, river running through it, lots of spaces for you to, I suppose, walk, have time to yourself, meet your friends, etc. So just an all-over good environment to spend 4 years in terms of furthering your education. And I mentioned the student experience there. Very vibrant clubs and societies, lots of sports clubs, lots of societies around debating, the International Society, the Outdoor Pursuits Society, and of course, if you have a particular interest in any society that you want to set up, we facilitate that as well. So 4 things in summary with respect to UL: our employment statistics of our graduates, our international student experience, our campus, and the general student experience through our vibrant clubs and societies. The business school at the University of Limerick is the Kimmy Business School, and that's accredited business school by AMBA and by AACSB. And we would expect over the next couple of years to be EQUIS accredited as well. Those accreditations are stamps of quality. And when we get our EQUIS accreditation, we will be amongst the top 1% of business schools in the world. So that triple accreditation is very important to us. Like I said, we have 2 bits of it already, AMBA and AACSB, and we'll be working hard on EQUIS over the coming years. Our business school is divided into 4 departments, and they go by discipline essentially. So we have accounting and finance, which is my department, which also includes taxation and risk management. We have economics and finance, we have marketing and management, and we have work and employment studies. So 4 departments within our business school, identifying our specialisms, our strengths. And I suppose that forms the basis for our degrees, which I'll go on to talk about in a second. But with respect to the business school, the 3 degrees that we have are the Bachelor of Business Studies, like I said previously, which would be the equivalent of Commerce in UIG or Commerce in UCD. We just have a different designation, BBS, as opposed to BCom. We have the BA in International Business, which I alluded to earlier, which is quite a broad-based degree, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail in a while. And we have Law and Accounting, which is essentially a 50% law, 50% accounting degree. So let me go into some detail around the degrees that we have on offer. I'll start with the Bachelor of Business Studies. So what does a Bachelor of Business Studies involve? Well, the first thing I'd say is you don't have to have studied business in school to undertake a Bachelor of Business Studies or BCom. I myself studied physics, applied maths and chemistry. So I had no business background and chose a business degree. So the Bachelor of Business Studies, what it does is it allows you to come in first year and you do a little bit of everything. So you study some economics, you study some accounting, some management, some HR, some communication, some maths and stats, nothing too difficult. In the maths and stats, it's more applied to business situations. That will give you a taster essentially of all of the business disciplines. And at the end of the first year, we'll ask you to pick what we call your major, which is also your specialism. So what are the majors that are available? Well, the majors are accounting and finance, economics and finance, risk management and insurance, human resources, and marketing. Okay? So at the end of first year, you will pick one of those majors, which will stream you for the remainder of your journey with us. All right. So that's the first thing. Taster in first year, and then you pick your specialism or your major. Now, when you come in first year, you can choose to do a language or not. The languages are French and German if you're good at them in school, or Japanese, Spanish from scratch. Okay? You don't have to choose a language, but it's there for you if you wish. If you choose a language, you combine it with one of those majors that I talked about. So you might do accounting and finance with Japanese, HR with French, whatever the case might be. If you choose not to do a language, you combine your major with a minor. And there's a long list of minors, but for example, I did the Bachelor of Business Studies, I majored in accounting and finance, and I minored in financial services. You might major in risk management and insurance, and minor in law. Okay? So you really get to tailor the degree to your preferences. So that's a nice aspect to a Bachelor of Business Studies degree. Now, in the Bachelor of Business Studies, you go on 9 months work experience in third year. You can choose to do that locally, nationally, or internationally, and we match our jobs with your preferences. The norm would be, not always, but the norm would be if you're an accounting student, you go to an accounting role. If you're a HR student, you go to a HR role. Again, that's what we try to do, match our jobs with your preferences. In terms of the BAIB, International Business, it's even more flexible than the Bachelor of Business Studies. Again, you can choose to do a language or not. The options are the same, French and German if you're good at them, Spanish or Japanese from scratch. Now, with the BAIB, you essentially choose your subjects every semester for the whole journey across across the degree. So you never opt necessarily for a specialism that streams you in a certain direction. You build your degree as you move through it. So you pick 5 modules every semester. Now there are some limitations and some constraints, but essentially you build your own degree as part of that. The big differentiating feature of the BAIB from the other degrees is the compulsory third year abroad. So that would be 3 months with a prestigious international university partner and 9 months working internationally. Obviously, if you don't choose language, you're going to end up somewhere like the States or Australia or wherever. If you do French, for example, it might be Canada or France that you've done that. But again, we don't make you choose those things in isolation or decide those things in isolation. We have an advisor system that will help you figure all of that out. And finally, then you've got law and accounting. Now, law and accounting is slightly different. It's a more structured degree. It's less flexible. That's not a criticism. In fact, some people love the thought of not having to make choices as they move through their third level education. With law and accounting, it's essentially 50% law and 50% accounting. The graduates are in huge demand. That combination of skills is very interesting to employers. The lawyers like people to come with an accounting background for things like forensic accounting, etc. The accountants like the lawyer background in terms of things like taxation, governance, ethics, etc. So law and accounting, I just warn people, and this goes for anything that you're thinking about doing, just be sure when you're looking at degrees that there's some flexibility there or not. If you're sure it's something you want to do, that's great. But if you're kind of unsure, just look at the options and in terms of how you can pivot into one area or the other, depending on the structure of the degree. So I go back to the BBS, for example. You get a taster in first year, and then you decide. Whereas law and accounting, you're somewhat locked into law and accounting for the 4-year journey. Again, not a criticism of that program, just a different structure. So there are the 3 degrees. In terms of points, I suppose they are relatively high points programs. Roughly the BBS 420 to 430 on average over the last number of years. Law and accounting 430 to 450 type of area, and BAIB 500 to 510 type area. So just to have a sense of what the points are. Now you can discuss with your guidance counsellor and get in touch with the university in terms of alternative routes, particularly into the Bachelor of Business Studies, if it's something that you really want to do but might not be attaining those points levels. So just because the program is out of range initially in terms of points, often there are ways to access it later on. And again, that's something that you have to check out with your guidance counsellor and with the universities that you're interested in attending. I want to talk to you a little bit now about the career options out of a business degree, whether that be the BBS, Bachelor of Arts in International Business, or the Law and Accounting degree. I think one of the main features of doing business at UL in particular is it gives you an awful lot of options in terms of where your career can go. And what I'll do is I go through the disciplines as such by the various specialisms that we have. So I do accounting and finance, economics and finance, risk management and insurance, and HR and marketing. All right, and I kind of maybe open your eyes in terms of the careers that are available. I leave the 2 traditional ones, accounting and economics, towards the end. And let me start with, say, for example, marketing. So marketing might be simply defined as selling either a product or a service. And if you come and study marketing at UL, you will be exposed to marketing experts who will be much better informed than me. I'm a finance guy in terms of marketing, but I can open your eyes somewhat as part of this talk. If we think about marketing on 3 levels, advertising, marketing, and branding. Like advertising is a fairly straightforward concept, even though there's very clever advertising and memorable advertising, but fundamentally you're getting across information about something first. So for example, 6 cans of Coke for €2, supermarket bright sign, drawing your eye towards it, encouraging you to take up that offer. Or an event is taking place, where is it on, what date, what time, what the entry fee is, etc. Or advertising particular sales, or offers, or new products, as the case might be. Great, and we advertise now online generally because of the way the world has gone, as opposed to in paper, magazine type stuff like we did previously. So that's good, right? And that's fine. And you could be in advertising sales, or you could be on the creative side of advertising, or you could be I suppose, assessing the effectiveness of marketing campaigns or advertising campaigns. Again, I slipped into marketing there. So if we come up to marketing and we keep the example of Coca-Cola, so advertising 6 cans of Coke for €2, marketing, think about when they put the names on the cans and the bottles. So what Coca-Cola did was they changed their labeling process and they put names on cans and bottles. That was part of a large marketing campaign. And that marketing campaign had social media, billboards, radio and television backing it up. But fundamentally, whether you like to admit it or not, or whether the world likes to admit it or not, people start to take photographs of themselves with a can of Coke with their name on it. And groups of people start to take photographs with everybody holding a can or a bottle with their names on it. So suddenly one of the biggest brands in the world, Coca-Cola, had its consumers marketing it for them. I mean, what a simple campaign in terms of the cost effectiveness of just changing the labeling process and getting people to engage with the brand on that basis. And there, I've said it again, I've slipped into it, we're gone up towards the branding now, the branding of the product. And the branding is the most interesting part of marketing, in my opinion, because it's got psychological components attached to it. Why are you loyal to certain brands? What are brands? How do brands manage themselves? How do they message the world? So I often on school visits talk about Hollister as a brand. And I know it might be fashionable now or whatever, but it was fashionable relatively recently. And I often ask the question, what do Hollister sell? And people would say clothes. Yeah, they sell clothes, but really, is that what they sell? They're actually selling a lifestyle. If you look at all of their advertising or their imagery, it's all about the west coast of the USA, beautiful people, beautiful weather, beautiful beaches, whatever the case might be. So the theory is, possibly, and again, I leave it to the marketing experts, but when you put your Hollister top on and it's a wet, dreary Monday morning in Ireland, are you somewhere deep inside being transported to the west coast of the USA as per their brand and per their imagery? That's branding. Why do people remain loyal to brands across their life? Why does somebody drive an Audi all their lives? And why do they remain loyal to that? There's an association between them and the car and them. There's some sort of psychological connection. So lots of brands are trying to infiltrate your brain on a daily basis. So you've branding, you've marketing, you've advertising. And remember, how we deal in those areas now is completely different to how we did 10, 20 years ago. I mean, how do people sell stuff these days? Influencers is one role. Social media, big time. Online advertising. Very, very interesting, creative space potentially. Sales is a career out of it. Managing brands, running marketing campaigns, running social media accounts, running digital advertising campaigns, advertising executives, advertising sales, etc. So for example, sales, your local radio station is selling ads right now. So what they're doing is they're contacting customers and they're saying, well, if you advertise on the radio, we will reach so many people, we put it on our website and we promote this for you. And then as somebody who needs to advertise with local radio, you're making a decision whether that's going to return on investment from your perspective. So business, marketing, advertising, branding, very interesting area. And by the way, we've a master's program in marketing, consumption and society. How do we consume things now compared to how we did in the past? You consume your music on your phone, you consume your media on your phone. That's totally transformed how we approach marketing. It's driven by societal changes in many ways. In terms of HR, human resources and human resource management, that's a very, very interesting space. Traditionally, we would have looked at HR in terms of hiring and firing people. Absolutely. How do we hire people? Well, we generally interview them. Is interviewing a good process? In my view, again, I'm not an expert, but in my view, interviewing is a very flawed process. I've done many interviews. Have I given a totally honest representation of myself? I'd like to think so, but it's certainly embellished to a certain extent, and I try to hide my faults. Now, you can get very good at interviewing and asking the right questions and following up, etc., and asking people for examples of when they've done well or how they've reacted to challenges, etc. So recruitment is an aspect of HR that you might be interested in. How do you hire people properly? How do you get the best person for the job? Now, the best person might be the cleverest, or they might have the highest points in the leaving, or they might have the best degree. It's the best person for the job. So do they fit the job? So sometimes now to hire people, companies will go through a fairly long process, maybe do some aptitude tests, some tests of ability, bring them into a centre, get them to do some group work, observe people. Do they work well with teammates? Do they handle conflict? Are they problem solvers? Do they show good commitment to the task? In other words, if they hit a problem in the task that they're set, do they throw their hands in the air and say, I'm done? Or do they say, okay, let's think about this another way, let's find a way? So that's an interesting part of HR. Also, this idea of maybe helping people in terms of their CVs and helping people to highlight what they're good at. I often in schools ask, well, have you got a part-time job? And invariably it'll be something like in a restaurant or a deli or in a local bar or whatever the case might be. And say, if you take the deli example, I say to people, well, what do you do in the deli? And they say, I make sandwiches and I work the tills or whatever. And if you think about what you're actually doing in the deli, we can talk about competencies as opposed to the stuff that you do. So if you're working in a deli, are you dealing with customers every day and talking to them? Yeah? Or do you possibly have probably have very strong communication skills? Are you working as part of a team in the shop? Yes, well, I'm assuming you've got good team working skills then. If there's a problem in the shop or in the deli, do you deal with it yourself or do you wait for a manager? Do it yourself. Problem solving, showing a bit of initiative. As customers complain, conflict resolution. You know, you've got the kind of competencies that are important in my job are just as important inside in your job, and you're showing those competencies straight away. That's assuming you're doing well in the deli and you're performing well. So there's competency stuff, there's CV consultancy, there's recruitment, and then there's the whole area of work and organizational psychology, work and organizational behavior. Many large organizations now are very concerned about you being mentally and physically fit at work. That's why they provide work and organizational psychologists on site and gyms at work. There's a whole wellness at work is an important area. And then there's an area I'm particularly interested in that kind of falls within this discipline. That's the whole area of knowledge management. If you are running a company, if you hire me and I'm there for 20 years, I pick up loads of knowledge around the company. And that could be social capital, in other words, my relationships with maybe customers and colleagues, etc. It could be technical knowledge, anything like that. And companies are very concerned now about how I share my knowledge with other employees, how they seek knowledge from me, how we capture the knowledge, and how we allow people to access the knowledge. So the whole area of knowledge management is an important area within this discipline of HR. So there's lots of different areas within HR that you may not have considered, and just by me talking about it for a couple of minutes might open your eyes to more areas. In fact, one of my colleagues asked a very interesting question, and if you come to UL and you study HR, you might be able to answer it better than I can. Are happier workers more productive, or are more productive workers happier? So think about that one in the context of HR and business at UL. So the next area I can talk to you about is risk management and insurance. Very interesting area. Let's look at insurance to start with. I mean, insurance, we're all aware of life insurance, health insurance, home insurance, car insurance. And these all need to be priced, they need to be sold, the risks need to be managed, there's a reinsurance aspect, there are legal aspects for all of these insurance type contracts. They are all areas that you could go into if you study business at UL and specialise in risk management. My colleagues are researching things like emerging risks, and one of the big ones that they're looking at are autonomous vehicles. So you might say, well, what about autonomous vehicles got to do with business? Well, they have a lot to do with it, really, when you think about it in terms of risk. So I often use this rather horrible example, but you've got an autonomous vehicle driving down the road, a narrow country road, just enough room for the vehicle to drive down it, it's going at an appropriate speed, but for some unknown reason from the left hand it jumps a granny, from the right hand it jumps a child. What does the car do? Does it swerve left or does it swerve right? You're now in a situation where a machine is making a decision on your behalf. You're in an autonomous vehicle, you're the driver only in name. The machine will do what it needs to do. As a human being, potentially, your emotions, etc., could drive that decision rather than go left or right. Are you comfortable with the machine making the decision? Yeah. Now let's take the emotion out of it. Let's just go to the car now and let the autonomous vehicle hit off another car as parking. Who's responsible for that? The driver, nominally. The people who wrote the software. The car manufacturer. Who's responsible? If we can't identify who's responsible, how are we supposed to manage the risk, how are we to insure it, etc. So that's a very interesting aspect of emerging risks. There's also the whole area of artificial intelligence and machines making more decisions on our behalf than they have ever done before. The final one that I mentioned in that space actually revolves around insurance again. 20 years ago, in fact, maybe 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, there was no such thing as pet insurance. Why is there pet insurance? And again, it's an example of business reacting to society. When I was your age, the hierarchy in Irish households was parents, children, pets. I believe that the hierarchy in Irish households now is pets, children, parents. So pets have gone to the top of the tree with respect to the Irish household hierarchy. So what does that mean? Well, it means when pets get sick now or get injured, we as a society are much more prepared to spend a lot of money on their recovery, and rightly so. So pet insurance has evolved essentially from that. And now we want to be in a position that if our pets get injured or become unwell, we look after them. So pet insurance facilitates that. Great example of business reacting to a change in society. So within insurance, you have insurance sales, you have reinsurance, you have risk management, you have drawing up the contracts, you have the legal side, the ethics side, all of those types of things. Then I've left the traditional ones to the end, accounting and finance. Well, accountants, yes, they do books of accounts, yes, they prepare financial statements, but this idea that that's all they do is very flawed. Accountants are in many ways consultants to business. So if the business is struggling with its cash flow, an accountant can help in terms of identifying what the problem is. If a business needs to expand and it needs to figure out how to finance that expansion, an accountant can help with that. If a business is, looking at its margins, an accountant can help with that. Like, do you understand what a margin is? Like large supermarkets like Jones, Tesco, SuperValu, they're working off tiny margins. So for every euro you spend there, they might be making 2 or 3 cents in terms of profitability, if even that. Now don't cry for them because they're doing millions of turnover every day, and 2-3% of millions is still a very good profit figure, but they have to manage their margins really tightly. Whereas your local country type store, they'll be running margins that much higher because their turnover is lower. And jewelers will only sell 1 or 2 watches per day, so they take a massive margin. So you learn about stuff like that if you study accounting. Now within accounting as well, you should consider there's management accounting, which involves working with industry and maybe figuring out the cost of product and trying to make cost savings within a production facility, etc. There's also taxation. And that's part of our accounting degrees where you learn about taxation legislation and tax liabilities and tax compliance, etc. Which is a very lucrative career if you're good at tax and all the issues to do with tax. Then finance. Finance is my area. Finance is all about stocks, bonds, derivatives, how to finance a company, whether to make a product or not, or whether to invest in something or not. And we would teach the skills around that. I suppose if I was to give one example of finance and what you might learn about would be the idea of diversification within an investment setting. So let's say you have a good chunk of money to invest. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, we call it diversification. So I give the silly examples of an umbrella company and an ice cream company. Don't just invest all your money in the ice cream company. Put 50% in the ice cream company and 50% in the umbrella company. When the sun is shining, the ice cream company does well. When the rain is falling, the umbrella company does well. We get a better risk-return trade-off by that type of activity. And we can prove it mathematically within a finance degree if you come to UL and study business and choose accounting and finance as your major. You'd also learn about pricing shares, pricing bonds, pricing derivatives, how the stock market works, etc., etc. So a vast area for you to go into with respect to accounting and finance, financial accounting management, accounting, trading, portfolio, wealth management, etc. And then the final one, I always leave it to last because I think economics is really the building blocks of any business degree. And economics really is at the interface of society and business to a certain extent, or society and the economy. So with economics, you can kind of think about lots of things to do with the economy and link it to society. So one of the examples that I use would be, there'll be a budget this year, and forget about the politics of it, but there'll be a budget, and one of the issues will be how we start to repay the borrowing that we've been required to undertake to get through this pandemic. So the tax increases will be on the table. They might even consider cutting social welfare rates, etc. Economists can kind of talk about things like that. So yeah, tax increases will bring in more tax revenue, which may help to pay down the debt, but it will mean less money in people's pockets, which means they won't be able to spend money in the local businesses, etc., etc. Similarly, if they decrease social welfare rates, it could increase the homelessness problem, it could drive people into poverty traps, etc. So there'll be discussions to be had around the economic policy decisions that the government make going forward. And other than that, within economics, you can have discussions around policies to do with, for example, rural broadband, to do with farming, to do with charities. So lots of lobbyists exist, and they can make arguments to the government that, for example, if you give farmers a certain tax break on machinery, that will result in X more jobs in that sector. If you give tax breaks to the tourism sector by reducing that, etc., that will result in better tourism activity. You know, and again, tourism experts, economics experts, broadband experts in terms of policy within the University of Limerick's Business School, and that would open your eyes to all of that stuff. So, look, I've spoken for 10, maybe 15 minutes tops with respect to careers. They are vast on the business degree, and I've only scratched the surface. Also, after your business studies degree, there's the potential for you to go on to a master's in the business school. So you can start with your business degree, and you can either broaden or you can specialize. So as an example, in terms of the longer plan, is the MSc in Financial Services, the MSc in Business Analytics, the MSc in Work and Organisation Behaviour, the MSc in Human Resource Management, the MA in Tourism, the MSc in International Management and Global Business, MSc in Project Management, Marketing, Consumption and Society. So there's loads of follow-on options as well for you if you really pick something within business that you feel that you really love and you want to pursue even further. You can go on and do the Masters, which will set you up for higher earnings across your career, and the research says that when you have a Masters you learn more across your career. So look, I hope that's opened your eyes with respect to business degrees and the options that you have as a result of it. So to conclude, business at UL, whether it be the BA in International Business, the Bachelor of Business Studies, or Law and Accounting, are super options. They're really good options in terms of their flexibility and in terms of the employability opportunities that you have. They're also excellent in terms of the potential for you to have an international experience, both within the university and outside it. In terms of a business degree, you'll probably spend 15 to 20 hours in a classroom with somebody instructing you, depending on the options that you take. Certainly no less, maybe a little bit more, but that gives you an awful lot of time to do everything that you should do at university. And I give 3 pieces of advice. Go to your classes. You should be making 90% plus of your classes. Everybody misses a class or 2 at university, but you should be trying to get to the vast majority of it. That's where we add value as lecturers. You should meet your friends on campus, and you should join a club or society, at least one. And I think if you do those 3 things, generally college can be a fairly straightforward experience. If you don't do those things, and particularly if you're living away from home, you're not attending your classes, you're not meeting your friends on campus, you don't join a club or society, you're just basically living away from home, then you're not part of the university community. So I think there are the 3 significant piece of advice that I would give anybody, whether they're going to UL or anywhere else, is to take that on board, and generally after that the experience should be relatively straightforward.